This is the Jess Broadcasting Network on air, a podcast about trail and ultra running, but really, it's about becoming who you are meant to be. I'm your host, Jess Walhoff, inviting you into conversations about resilience, wonder, and the quiet magic of putting one foot in front of the other. Out on the trail, we learn to move our mountain, not by force, but by presence and persistence. And in that movement, we find joy in the journey. Hello and welcome back to the JWBN. Today's episode is going to be pretty much all things Black Hills 100 weekend. I'm currently on my way home from the Black Hills here and just wrapped up a pretty epic weekend. So I'm just going to kind of dive in and throw my whole experience of the weekend out there. Start out with a little bit of my history with this race. In 2018, I ran my first ever ultra marathon out at the Black Hills. I ran the 50K. Took me about 7.5 hours, tripped, fell 3 times, bloody knee, all the good stuff. Had a blast. Came back for the 50 mile, my first ever 50 mile in 2019. 2020 was COVID year, but then 21 I came back and finished my first ever 100 mile race. And then in 2022, I was able to crew my friend Jeff for his 100 mile race, helped him get a 3rd place finish. And then I actually missed his finish because I hopped on a bus to get to the start of the 30K and ran the 30K, got my black buffalo skull, which you've seen in the background, Sally. If you do all 4 race distances, you collect a black buffalo skull. And I also did some volunteering that year too at Packet Pickup and ended up given a knife and a watermelon cutting duty at the very first aid station. So then in 23, I guess I went back and I did some more volunteering, Packet Pickup for sure, and then actually said, hey, I'll help run your aid station at Alkali. So I ended up being kind of in charge of Alkali on the way out. And then Brian was running that year, so I saw him a couple times. I think I ended up putting myself to work at Dalton Lake, which is mile 31, helping them with their aid station. Ended up helping at Pilot Knob on the outbound too when a huge thunderstorm came through. And then I was able to pace friend Charlene from Silver City, the turnaround mile 53 back to Nemo. And then more crewing for Brian, party at the finish line. So that would have been 23, 24. More volunteering, crewing and pacing of my friend Andy. Last year, 25, I attempted to run the 100 mile once again. It was a warm year. I ended up DNFing, dropping at Dalton Lake on my way back, so I got 75 miles in, dropped with heat exhaustion. I was half an hour ahead of the cutoff there, and actually when I laid down and got ice all over me, I started to feel so much better. But there's a 13-mile stretch without any crew, goes through the canyon, you're just completely exposed to the sun, it gets hot, and I know better than to do that section because I knew the sun was just going to hit me again, so I dropped at mile 75. No regrets on that. And then this year, here's the story of this year. This year I came out here on Wednesday after work, grabbed my cabin at the RV park, a great place to stay. That's where the Packet Pickup for the race is. Cabins are nice and little cozy things, and a lot of runners end up staying there, so it's a nice little hangout party for us. Thursday morning, I got up super early and went to Bear Butte, which is just outside of Sturgis. It's a butte, so it's a little mountain. It's a 1.5 mile trip up the mountain with about 1,000 feet of climbing and then a 1.5 mile trip down. So 3 miles round trip. I got there about 4:30. Sunrise is 5:11. So I raced the sun to the top and I just beat it before the sun was all the way up. Got some great photos and just enjoyed that beautiful morning. It was a little cool, but a little humid too. It was an odd weekend. We had some humidity in the hills, which the hills usually aren't as humid as they were. But it was also cool, as in cold, cool. So after that, I ended up playing a little bit of pickleball that morning too with My friend Jeff was running the 100. His wife and her parents came out, so I ended up pickleballing with them. And then packet pickup, kind of helped run that organization part with them, doing most of the 100 bib pickups. A couple shorter distance come in, but hand up their bibs, answer any questions they may have, make sure they're squared away with their drop bags and their crew. And again, any questions they have. Some interesting questions always arise, interesting people always arise. A little bit of education for the people who maybe did some reading, maybe they didn't do some reading, where people are asking, how do I track my runner? Which there is no live tracking with this race. It's one, that gets expensive. Two, most of the course there is no cell reception, so there would be no point for crew to track runners because they'd have no way to access cell reception to track their runners. So then a little education with that, and then again, education. We have printout for driving instructions, but a little education on, hey, maybe you want to put your pinpoints in your Google Maps and download your maps offline so you can access it that way. And a lot of blank stares and a lot of just ask Google for help and they'll help you out and get you to the right spot. So that was packet pickup. I left that about an hour early so I could get over to finally finish the official part of all the races that happen at Black Hills. So you have your 30K, 50K, 50 mile on Saturday. The 100 mile starts on Friday. Thursday night, the official beer mile of the Black Hills put on by Emily. She's part-time liver out in Sturgis. So they have a home there and host a beer mile Thursday night before the Black Hills 100 starts. And some traditional beer mile rules, but also it's not official, so people could drink whatever they wanted. And it's not around a track, it's around their block essentially. And a little new setup this year because they have a different home this year, but we started right in front of their house and ran the sidewalk and through a church parking lot and then down the alleyway and then around the block and back to her place. Traditional beer rules, you drink your drink. You have about a 10-20 yard stretch to drink it, dump your can, and then take off running. Do that quarter mile, come back, drink, run, repeat 4 times. If you throw up, you get to do an extra bonus lap, only 1 bonus lap, despite how many times you may throw up. For me, I don't drink much like ever, and the only thing I do drink is a cider. So I did all of my beer mile, my whole beer mile with Angry Orchard cider. And I don't drink. I also don't chug. So that was the hardest part, was drinking and then also keeping it down. Survived that first lap. Second lap, right away I started gagging and had a spectacular vomit while I was running through the church parking lot. Like, I threw up and ran at the same time. It was great. That was not caught on camera. And then as soon as I got out of the parking lot, I still needed to throw up more, so I did stop and do that one. And then I took off running again. I managed to put down and hold down drink number 3 and number 4. And then I had to do my bonus lap and pass the only other female doing the race during that bonus lap while she had to throw up. And that was Jeff's wife, Nicole. Otherwise, she was going to beat me, which I thought she would do quite handedly, but she couldn't hold it that last lap. I ended up official DFL, because I was the only one who did their bonus lap for throwing up. So way to complete things. And then I had a spectacular Ralph about a minute after I finished. So did that, don't have to do it again. I would not recommend. Very intoxicated after that. Even very grateful I was able to throw up as much as I did. So that was my Thursday. And then Friday is the start of the Black Hills 100 mile race. They start at 10 a.m. on Friday at Woodall Field. They had 139 bibs assigned. At least they were 1 through 139. So I'm going to say there were about 139 signed up. I know there were 2 people that did not show up to the start line. And so we're going to say they had about 130-ish running the 100 mile race. So spectacular start. Then I took off and running. I hopped in my car, drove to Alkali because I had volunteered myself again to run that aid station for them. Got there and then had to wait for Chris to show up with everything to set up the aid station. And while I was waiting, a photographer showed up and he wasn't quite sure where he should be going to take pictures, what the best place was where they would like him to be. And so I gave him an idea to head down the trail to the north a little bit towards Bear Butte, like just park over here around the corner. You can see Bear Butte in the background, get him coming up and over this cattle guard, which then one of my friends, Brian, ended up being in that vicinity. And so he was the model, making sure the photographer was set up in the right spot and helped him get it going. And then Chris showed up with his truck full of things, so helped unload the truck, haul these big 5-gallon water jugs up the trail. It's a whole, 50 yards I had to carry it, but it was uphill. Got our stuff set up and start organizing things, and everybody's there because it's like a 5-minute drive from the start. So everybody's showing up and just waiting, even though the first runner doesn't show up until about an hour after the start, because it's about 7.5 miles from the start. Saw one of my Sioux Falls friends walk by, and I said, "Hey Matt, do you want to make PB&J sandwiches?" So I handed him a very sharp knife because that's all we had, and he got to work making sandwiches for me. Shannon's mom was cutting up our watermelon. I got our waters all set up, pop and chips and all those goodies. And then we had, when the runners coming through, well, first Jeff was he was 1 and 2. 1 and 2 came in right together. Jeff and Ethan did. So Nicole and I, one of us threw a pack on him, one of us handed him his water and his extra water bottle, and he was out of there in 2 seconds, a whole 2-second stop, if that. So crewing him there didn't take much, so that's why I was able to also run the aid station. And then once more runners started showing up, we had 3 of us at all times with a water pitcher in our hand, with 2 5-gallon jugs set up of water, trying to help people through there as fast as possible with filling bottles and bladders, and they could self-service their snacks, but a little bit chaotic. It goes by really, really fast. First runners, like I said, I think Jeff was there at 11:04, and it's, like I said, 7.5-ish miles into the race. So our last runners came through right before noon, so pretty quick wrap up, and that's the time I needed to leave anyway to get to Elk Creek to do the cruise stint for Jeff. So yeah, we quick wrapped that up, threw things back in, so things were torn down but also stashed and organized for Alkali inbound the next day. So I drove over to Elk Creek. I parked my car. New this year is that they let people drive all the way up to the actual aid station of Elk Creek. Otherwise, people would be driving down to the trailhead of Elk Creek and park there, and it just gets so clustered, and I hate it, the driving and how the way people park. And it's a tiny, bumpy, rutted road anyway, and then we have people parking not so great, and it's just So I parked my car at the start of the 30K, which is up from the trailhead, and it's actually where you can turn off to drive up to the actual aid station. So I parked my car just over a half-mile walk to the trailhead. Nicole was already there with her parents, and we made sure our bottles and vests were already stashed and organized and waited. And then Jeff came flying in, and he just drops his vest there, and we throw one on, hand him his waters again, have his snacks pre-packed, and he's down the trail. And 2 seconds right after him, here comes that Ethan guy, and Laren from the hills followed right after that, and another kid from Colorado is right behind them. So our top 4 came in probably with it at least less than 2 minutes apart all through that trailhead. And then since I was done with Jeff there, he had a 13-mile stint until we saw him again. I hiked up from the trailhead to the actual aid station, probably encountered 5 or 6 runners on their way down, cheer them on. Got to the aid station and then somewhat put myself to work, either filling up waters or ices or trying to find drop bags for people. And then waited for my other Sioux Falls friends and one of my athletes to come in so I could help crew them. And they came in about right on time and right on the time that I needed, like right for me to leave in time to get to the next aid station. So that all worked out swell. They all looked good. So our next aid station was a 13-mile jaunt from there for the runners. So hop in the car, or walk down half a mile, then I hop in the car, drive over to Dalton Lake, get to Dalton Lake, and again, help Nicole set things up for what Jeff has on his I need this list, and then get other accessories ready just in case. Jeff came flying in, again, right on time for that one. I believe it was about, I'm not going to get my times right. I have video evidence of it all, but he was right on time, right on pace, right on my predicted time for him. And he dropped his vest, and at the same time he dropped his vest, he dropped his shirt and took off running because he was warm, and he didn't want any of that anymore. I think he was mostly warm because he had a vest on. I think his shirt would have kept him cool yet if he kept it on, but he took off, and he had managed to gain about a 10-minute gap on the next runner. In that stint. And that next runner, Ethan, took a little bit more time at that aid station. Colorado kid took a little bit of time, was a little bit behind, but didn't take as much time. So those two guys ended up leaving close together. Runners were definitely feeling a little warmer when they got to Elk Creek or to Dalton Lake. For those front runners, it was about, if I'm math right, I think it was about 3 o'clock or so that they were coming in. So heat of the day, again, gets pretty hot in the canyon on your way to Dalton Lake, and then top of that climb too is pretty. You have pine trees, but they don't do much for the shade blocking, so it's pretty exposed. There's a nice mile uphill climb out of Dalton Lake, and then they get to hit some ATV trails, which they're gaining some notoriety, those ATV trails, for being the least fun part of the course. Jeff had about an 8-mile stint to our next aid station stop in Nemo. So after we saw the top 2 guys come in, left Dalton Lake and headed over to Nemo, got our stuff again all set up, started to plan because Jeff did not have a shirt on. He would be coming in before 5 o'clock. I think it was about 4:30ish or 4:45. We're like, Jeff needs clothes or sunscreen, so we had a dry shirt ready for him. We had sunscreen ready for him, and I took the shirt he had taken off, which is one of those. It's a Run Rabbit shirt, one of their flannel ones, so it's one of those nice cooling ones. And it was already wet with his sweat. I just doused it with water, so it was cleaner and wet and cool. So he comes flying in. Nicole yells at him, he needs shirt or sunscreen. He says no. I said wet shirt or sunscreen, and he complied to put the wet shirt on. He was also very, very thirsty at that point. His plan had been just doing 2 water bottles between the aid stations all the way from Dalton Lake to the turnaround back to Dalton Lake. But he was very thirsty because it was warm. So he ended up just drinking out of my personal water bottle and then grabbing his 2. And then Linda was trying to hand him his food, Nicole's mom, and he wasn't taking it from her. And she turns to me as he's running away. She's like, "What do I do with this?" He wouldn't take it. And I just start yelling at the top of my lungs, "Jeff, Jeff," and he's not stopping because friends are cheering for him. And I just yell out, "Jeff, stop!" And he stops and turns around and takes 2 steps back to grab his snacks. We cannot let people go without their snacks. And then he was off and running again down the ATV trail to Pilot Knob. We hung out in Nemo for, again, runners number 2 and 3, just so we could give Jeff a little bit of an idea of where he was at. He had gained another 10 minutes, I think, on them in between those stretches and their stops. They took a little bit more time on their aid station stops than Jeff was taking. Pilot Knob is kind of nice. You can see him running down. One of the kids and Jeff's father-in-law went up to cheer at the top and ring their cowbell, so we have a little bit more warning of when he's coming. But we were all set up and again ready for him. We figured we put an extra water bottle for him, got ready this time. Instead of having his 2 there, we've filled up 3. As he's running down, we can ask him, do you want your pack or do you just need 2? He says, let's pack it, so we could put those bottles in his pack, throw his snacks in his pack, throw his pack on him, and sent him on his way with the extra water bottle in his hand. And again, in and out of these aid stations, most of them 30 seconds or less, maybe a minute, and he's off and running again. I don't know if we didn't stay too long at Pilot Knob to catch where the next runners were at again. We just kind of took off for Silver City, which is the turnaround point, and got there, and they had an interesting time in Silver City. I guess the top of their tent was forgotten to get packed with everything else. So they had their tent set up, and they had Jimmy rigged a tarp to the top, and it actually looked really great. It just only covered half of their aid station, but they had done a great job. But then the top of their tent arrived while we were waiting for Jeff, so then we were able to watch them put that up and fix it, and then it looked spectacular. Their tent did. Waited and waited and waited for Jeff, and then finally Jeff comes in. That waiting game gets pretty hard, especially when you arrive early. He was about on pace. He arrived there probably 7:32ish, I think, was the time I had. So that took him about 9.5 hours to do the first stint, which is about, 52, 53 miles. He came in, he wanted a sock and shoe or a sock change. Just been picking up a lot of dirt in his shoes, so he irritated the feet. So we did a sock change, did a little bit of K-tape on his toes for some blister things he was feeling, hot spots. Relubed the feet, threw socks back on, threw the shoes back on. And again, off and running. That was about a 7-minute stop, so a longer stop than what we usually take, but had him off and running. Nicole's mom had cell service at our last aid station. We ended up being in a tornado warning for the hills area, so that got to be interesting. And then while at Silver City, you could see the sky changing a little bit. Start hearing some rumbles of thunder. Trying to watch the clouds movement. We're like, I think it's coming, so we decided to pack up right away. We knew Jeff wouldn't need us to stop and wait to see when the next runners were coming in, just because the next runners, he would be able to see them. It's an outback trail. Jeff left. We probably left the aid station, 5-10 minutes after he had turned around, after we had packed up, and was not too far down the road, and all of a sudden the sky just let loose. It's raining, and it starts hailing. Not big hail, but it's hail, which is harder than raindrops when they fall on you. I was driving 10 miles an hour or less just because my windshield wipers could not keep up with the rain. It was really hard to see the roads. This is about 7:30, so usually it's still daylight for about another hour, but it just was dark with the clouds and the rain, and so made for an interesting little drive. And your runners are all out in all of this too. The lightning show wasn't too spectacular, which is nice. There was some lightning, but it's been much worse out there, and all the runners just, it's a trail race. You kind of have to extract yourself from the trail when you're out in the middle of the woods when these things happen. So choices to go farther, you can't really know where to hunker down or anything. So people just kept moving forward. When we got to Pilot Knob, waited out in the car for a bit, and then the rain did settle down. So storm maybe lasted, the worst of it, half an hour, 40, 45 minutes, if that. Light drizzle when we got out of my car. The interesting thing is, for me, as soon as I pulled up to Pilot Knob, I had a light go off on my dashboard saying, hey, your tire pressure is low. Oh, this is perfect. Just what we needed in the middle of a trail race and while it's raining. So once the rain let up a bit, I got out, told Nicole's parents and Nicole, because they were in Nicole's car, what was going on. Found my little doohickey to check my tire pressure, and they were all about where they should be. My back driver's door was it was a 31 when it should be like a 33. And instead of being like, oh, if something happens and we have to change it, Nicole's parents were going to go back and sleep anyway. We had been planning on using my car as a crew car. Instead, we just handed my car off to them because we figured, well, if something happens to them, they can call AAA or 911. Not that they would need 911 for a flat tire, but they could deal with it versus me and Nicole trying to deal with a flat tire and also crew Jeff. Turns out, not a big deal. Her dad checked my tires when they got back to the cabin, and like he said, they were mostly where they should be. He put a little bit of air in my tire, and I should knock on wood as I'm driving home here. The indicator is off on my dash. Everything is just fine. So just a little bit of excitement for me. Anyway, Jeff arrives shortly after 9 o'clock to Pilot Knob in his rain poncho, looking fantastic. Great little fashion show with all those rain ponchos out on the trail. Strips that off. We had a dry shirt ready for him, knowing that was going to come. Bottles again and snacks, and he wanted to know where he was at, like how far the people were behind him. And I said, Jeff, we didn't hang out there. You ran into those guys on your way back. Where did you see him? He's like, oh, I was climbing up the hill and they were walking down it. I'm like, so you have over a mile, you put over, it's a mile to the start of the climb. So essentially I said, you have over 2 miles on them and an aid station stop. So you have at least 30 minutes on them. Just keep moving forward. They have to deal with everything you've had to deal with on the trail. Just keep moving forward. Later on, I saw a picture of what Silver City looked like after we had left. They had put so much work into getting that tent up and running again, and the storm knocked that tent down. It was all slanted, kittywampus. They were able to use about half of it yet to keep things dry underneath, but yeah, it was kind of resting on its edge on the other side, and I think half of the porta potties had blown over. So that limited the use of porta potties. So those other runners that were behind Jeff arrived to a very broken, distraught aid station that had looked so great when Jeff was there. So that maybe slowed them down. They all had crew, so we're able to help them out anyway. But it's just a little, sad when you come up to a sad aid station like that after the wind takes it out. So then Jeff is back on the ATV trail, which again, they're pretty notorious for being pretty awful, the worst part of the race. When it rains, they get all puddly filled and super slick. And people were slip sliding away on those trails. Jeff still made an okay time to Nemo, a little bit slower than what our goal and predicted time was. He started to lose time on his goal time of finishing at 7 a.m., 21 hours. But he was still moving really good, and at Nemo, he was able to pick up his friend John Hack for some pacing. Initially, Jeff's plan was to go pacerless for this whole race, but then some opportunities arrived, and he I'll take you for a pacer if you want it. So John jumped in at Nemo, which I think is the best thing that could have ever happened. John is probably one of the most upbeat people I know, positive people I know, and we forced Jeff to take some pulls just from the reports we had from people going the other way yet of how terrible that ATV section was. And there's a bit more hill to this ATV section than the last one. So we forced some pulls on Jeff. Jeff did come running in, and Nicole has a great video. He comes running in, we cheer for him, and then we go silent because he was able to have enough voice. He would be yelling what he needed as he's coming in so we could service him a bit faster. And we finish our cheer, and he's like, I need baby wipes, lube, and new underwear. So we get to work to dig those things out, chuck them at Nicole. She follows him straight into the porta potty. take care of business. I think we had about a 7-minute stop there to deal with that. He was having a little bit of stomach issues there. Did not like the cold mashed potatoes, did not like his guacamole wrap. I think he ended up running away with a tortilla, just a very plain tortilla, is what he ran out of there with John. And then the next section, you have about a mile where you're running down the road, another half mile down the highway, and then you hit the ATV section. Like we said, that was slick. Jeff said he probably did not run a single step on that ATV section because it was just too slick. Needed to stay upright. That 8-mile stint took him about 2 hours, which is, half hour, 20 minutes longer than our ETA predicted time and what we would like. But like we said, we knew everybody else was going to have to deal with the same type of trail. Forward is a pace, and he was moving good yet. He comes running in with John with shouts of pancakes. So we had some pancakes ready for him. We did, and new shoes. We knew we needed new shoes anyway when he had left the last aid station. So shoes and socks were ready for him. So he ate his pancakes. Nicole puts eye drops in his eyes. I take off socks and shoes all at the same time. Again, another re-lube of the feet. And we wiped off all the dirt off of his feet first, re-lube, then apply socks and shoes, and sent them back down the trail. And then they made great time to Elk Creek. Actually, compared to his 22 time, I think he ran that section about 10 minutes faster than he did in 2022. And Emily was able to pick him up there for pacing duties. Again, that just happily worked out on our end that she was available to help him out with that, and again, help with some positive energy, and keep him moving forward. He moves with purpose, but helps a lot more mentally when you have somebody to do this all with. That was a very quick turnaround at that aid station, probably maybe 2 minutes, and then we were off another 10 miles before we saw him again at Alkali. Alkali, we get there, Nicole and I do, and nobody's there yet. I mean, they've been working a lot better with their communication. One for sure aid station has Starlink now, where they could text out where the lead runners are, so aid stations would be up and ready for them. Because Jeff has gone through as a third place runner before, where aid stations were kind of asleep. So Nicole and I got to Alkali, before 5, nobody's there. We waited out, hang out. Brian comes to hang out with us. And then about the time where we're like, I think we should maybe start pre-prepping what we need just in case he runs as fast. Somebody showed up to set up the aid station, and I helped him a little bit with just need tables and water. He put up the water, and I've said, I think that's good enough. We have exactly what he needs. The only other thing is maybe some ginger ale is what he's going to need a shot of. And it was pretty much exactly what I said. We threw his pack on him again, and he did a couple shots of ginger ale and was out of there with Emily again, moving good and making great time. Then we ended up at the finish line in Sturgis, and he finished at 8 a.m., 8:12, I think, was the time that he finished. So it took him 22 hours and about 12 minutes, first overall this year. So that was a very fun part to be a part of, to help him reach that goal. His goal had been a 7 a.m. finish. 21 hours was the big goal, but you deal with the conditions you're given, and it ended up being a bit warm and humid on that first day. And he worked through little stomach issues here and there is about all he really had for issues. He worked through all of that. And then, when the storm came through at night, it cooled him off, but it kind of made the trails a mess. And again, just like you said, everybody else has to deal with the same trail. So just move forward with what you can do. And that's what he did. Kept a positive attitude throughout, and walked away as the champion, which was also a big goal of his, is to try to win that race. Top 3 for sure was a goal, but then came away with the W. And And then pretty much I just crashed at the finish line the rest of the day, had a very lovely nap. My original plan was to go back out on the trail, probably at Elk Creek, and help pace somebody in the last 18 miles. My top choice to pace had ended up dropping with some stomach and dizziness issues. My second person my plan B to pace also had dropped probably mile 60. I forget what he said he was at Pilot Knob. On his way back, he dropped. So then I was out of people I knew personally to pace. I know if I had showed up there and said, hey, anybody want to pace her, I'm very certain I would have easily had a taker, but I was exhausted with no sleep, and it was going to be 90 degrees. And I'm like, you know what? This finish line nap sounds a lot better than going back out on the trail. So I had a selfish moment and just stayed at the finish line and cheered people on and had a very, very lovely nap out there. So yeah, that was most of my weekend there, chasing Jeff around the hills, helping him bring home a buffalo skull. One thing that really helped with our crewing, like I said, we've done this before. Jeff ran his first ever 100 Mines of Spain in 21. He crewed me for my first ever 100 at Black Hills in 21. So we've done a lot of running and whatnot together. Now he runs a lot faster than I am. So we do some group chill runs together yet. But we've got a lot of experience with crewing, pacing each other, and just a lot of experience overall of crewing and pacing friends, that we've kind of figured out systems, especially how not to waste time in aid stations. And that is such a big thing. A lot of people can spend so much time in an aid station. And when you're at a race like Black Hills, where there's quite a few spots to crew, if we want to count them out with me here, we have Alkali, you have Elk Creek, you have Dalton Lake, Nemo, Pilot Knob, Silver City, back to Pilot Knob, Silver City, or Nemo, Dalton Lake, Elk Creek, and Alkali. So that is 11 stops you can see your crew. There are 2 more aid stations you hit 2 times, so 4 more aid stations in there too. So that makes for 15 aid stations total. If you spend 5 minutes at each aid station, that is math that I have to do while I'm also driving here. But that would be 50 plus another 25. So yeah, that is 75 minutes of your race that you spend at an aid station, if you spend 5 minutes at an aid station. So that's an hour and 15 minutes just at an aid station. And especially if you're like me and on the slower side and start chasing cutoffs, that's a lot of wasted time. And then if you're somebody like Jeff, who is, at the other end of the spectrum and trying to win a race, that is a lot of wasted time. So we've been working on our own crafts of perfecting our own aid station stops and helping out our crew to make these things flow a lot faster. So we have game plans, and I do most of the game plan before Jeff gave me the game plan. Like I said, we know each other's styles a bit. But Jeff's game plan was starting out with 2 hand pelts and has his flip belt. He was going to run that flip belt the whole way. Those longer sections, we were throwing a pack on him and an extra water bottle or 2. And that was the game plan, and we stuck to it until Pilot Knob, when he needed more water. And instead of doing just the flip belt 2 water bottles, we threw the pack on with 2 water bottles and an extra one in his hand. You just be ready for that just in case, and that's what we did. As a crew, it's very important to anticipate your runner's needs. So having things set up and ready to limit those aid station stops. It's always a good idea just to peruse the aid station to see what do they have for salty foods, what do they have for bland foods, what do they have for sweet foods. Usually runners, if things go south, they don't want sweet anymore, so finding those bland and salty foods are a big deal. So if you can peruse those for your runners so you know what to offer them, or say, hey, do you want boiled potato with salt? It's there. Those are good things just to do to prep your runner to help them through faster. Again, with the weather changes, when Jeff came into Silver City, we knew there might be some weather on his way back. We said, did you want to carry the poncho or carry a jacket. He said no, because those get quite warm wearing them anyway. But he said he had his emergency poncho on him, so that's what he took out and used, and it was great for that section. And when he got back, like I said, I knew he was going to need a shirt change because he was going to be all wet. So we had options of a dry t-shirt, a dry long sleeve, and a rain jacket in case he wanted that if he was cold. But with the humidity and how much he's pushing, it wasn't too cold, so just a light long sleeve. So just anticipating needs is a huge thing for crew. Having an idea what your runner wants and needs. Jeff had all of his snacks pre-portioned out for each section of trail, so he had a little baggie labeled, Dalton Lake out, and he had nicely put them in order too, so it was pretty easy just to reach in and grab, double check that that's what he wanted, to have the amount of snacks he needed. He also had another huge Ziploc baggie of extra snacks, saying, hey, if I start feeling hungry, I might want more of these Humas in there, or the Precision. They're just backups. And at one point he said he was done with the maple, no more syrup. So I started opening up, I'd open up, look what was in his snack bag and say, oh, maple syrup, take those out, replace them with a Huma and or Precision. At one point I started throwing in extra just in case. Again, we weren't quite on his expected or his big time goals. So a little bit slower between some sections, so maybe he might need an extra snack or two. So it's there for him. And he did a really good job when we were opening packets of getting out his trash. Really good job of eating all the snacks, or just having just that extra one or two left over. And water, he did a great job of drinking, at least through the day. Overnight it got less, still drank pretty well. And yeah, just having all of the things ready helped with such a smoother transition and less aid station stoppage. Because the thing is, once you sit down in a chair to take care of some things, or you have to think through them, you just start wasting time. And yeah, that's one thing you don't want to waste on any part of the trail, especially the fast side or the slow side when you're chasing cutoffs. So just being prepared for your runners. It helps too when you have pacers as you're running, just to list off to your pacer, hey, I have a hot spot we need to deal with, or hey, you know what sounds good? Pancakes when I get to this aid station, or all of that, so that your runner can make note by either throwing that in their phone so they know exactly what they have, or be like, we have 3 things we need to address, and those that you have now your runner and your pacer that can tell the crew exactly what needs to happen. So if you have crew and you have pacers, that's how you use them to your advantage. I know I've done some pacing too, when you get to aid station that's unmanned, grabbing the bottles for my runner and filling them up while they peruse some snacks, and just throwing them in her pack again, and then telling her to take off while I quick, grab and go myself. So things that you can do to help your runners out, or yourself out if you have with crew and pacers, to negate stoppage time. Both, like I said, on both ends. I know last year, even though I DNF'd, I took my stoppage time down drastically, just because I had a pack pre-packed for aid stations where I'd run in and all my crew had to do is I'd just take off my pack and they'd throw the new one on me. We'd douse me with some ice and maybe drink an Ensure or something like that for me right there. And I was on my way in less than 5 minutes easily. Just however slow it took me to drink an Ensure, and then I was on my way. So if you can limit aid station stops, it helps. Something that helped with our predicted times here, Jeff had made a spreadsheet, tried to do some math, and had sent it to me and Nicole, but then I had from 2022, actually, I think after you ran in 2022, I went through my photos like that weekend and looked up the timestamp for them all and wrote down what time I had taken those photos, and those indicated, either when he came in or had left an aid station. That's the thing is, you're not usually looking exactly at your watch or trying to you might look at your watch when your runner comes in, but you might not remember the time. I just grab my phone, take a photo, take a video, something, and then it's timestamped on my phone, arrival time, departures time. So I have those things to reference, for the next aid station. I'm like, wait, what time did he leave? So we can math out the miles that way. But because I had those photos, I had actually made a note in my phone and said, hey, he was at Alkali this time, and had most of his aid station times down from 2022 and saved it, so that we could re-reference for this race, and that then adjusted kind of his spreadsheet that way. So a little crew hack on that side too is, if you're going to repeat a race, doing things like that. That said, every race, you could do the same race over and over and over again, and it could be 100% different every single time. I've had a friend who's done Mines of Spain every single year, and every single year, very different results. The first 2 years she had lots of water and flooding to contend with and was wet, 100% of the time. And then she's had dry years, and then we had a rain year last year, and the result has been completely different every time. Depends on your fitness. You could have the same fitness every single time you show up to a race, but you have different weather to contend with each year. And that's an interesting thing with the Black Hills, being out there as many years as I have since 2018. So I think this was year 8 for me. Weather's been so different every year, and nothing's been quite repeated in all those 8 years. And that's one thing you can't really predict either. Even the day of the race, you didn't quite know what we were going to get for the whole weekend. You just have to be prepared, and it's something you can't control, but you can control how you're going to react to that. And if that's slowing down a little bit, or being a little bit smarter with your nutrition and fueling and drinking, hydration, all of that to contend with. And then you just know, what, everybody else is dealing with that exact same situation. So things like that to help with each race and preparation. Like I said, every year is a little bit different. This year he finished about 15 minutes faster than he had run in 2022. I think 2022 was pretty prime. They also had a thunderstorm overnight that hit a little bit later, though. He was able to get off the ATV section before the storm hit, so he didn't have any muddiness to contend with that year. He also got lost in Nemo that year. Took a little 3-ish, maybe 4-ish mile detour that year, so no bonus miles this year for him. But yeah, like I said, result end time wasn't too different from a few years ago, but just conditions that we had to deal with weather-wise and trail-wise were different. And yet this year, and it is what it is with competition that shows up. There was a very deep field, I thought, this year that showed up for the men's race for the Black Hills. And the exciting thing was, with the depth of the field that showed up, a lot of South Dakota represented in that depth of the field. Some things went sideways for some of those people. I think a lot of it was the heat. But a fun thing that ended up was that all the podium for the men's race, we had Jeff in first, we had Ian from the Rapid City area in second, and then we had John Palmer, who is also, I'm going to say Rapid City, they're both from the Black Hills, finished in third. So the men's podium was a South Dakota podium, which is pretty spectacular to do. This race is more of a, I'm going to say, grassroots race. There isn't a whole lot of fancy to it, but Ryan and Chris have done such a great job. Like I said, they've been putting this race on for 16 years now. And I've only been a part of it for the last 8, so I've only been there for half of it. So I don't know what it was like in the beginning, but I do know the last 8 years. And they've kept it grassroots. Their limit for runners is 150 people per distance, and they almost sell out. I'm going to say they have about 500 people running across all 4 distances that weekend. So they don't really do a whole lot of hard advertisement. It's just word of mouth and experiences that bring people out there. If you've never been to the Black Hills, it is stunning. I just love the Black Hills. And yet, here I am going back to the other side of the state. But Black Hills is definitely the best side of the state. So beautiful. I really don't have the words to describe it. You need to go out and see it. But also, it's also our little private paradise. So don't tell all your friends about it. But do come and see it. But also, don't bring everybody else out here. It's our little own secret. But yeah, you should check it out. There is one other ultra marathon that happens in the Black Hills, and that is Lean Horse. That takes place on the Mickelson Trail, which is a rail to trail. It's actually a 110-mile trail. They just use 50 miles of it as they do an out and back from Custer to the north, turn around after 50 miles and come back. So you only get to see half the trail. I've done the whole thing in its entirety once. I've seen a lot of the trail. Gosh. So I've FKT'd the trail. I attempted 50 miles once, and then the next time I did 67 miles the other way. Then I set the FKT, and then I DNF'd at mile 97 this year trying to FKT it the other way. So I put on 300 plus miles on that trail. And that's a very different beast than the Black Hills in that it is a rail trail. It's a little bit more open. That trail can get a little bit warm with exposure and the sun just reflecting off of the trail. And Lean Horse happens the very first weekend of August this year, so a little bit too warm also for my preference. Whereas the Black Hills takes part on the Centennial Trail, which is a 125-ish mile long trail that starts way on the south end of the Black Hills in Wind Cave National Park and ends at the tippy top of Bear Butte on the north end. With the Black Hills 100, they hop on the trail, the Centennial Trail at Fort Meade and Sturgis. So there's a 1 mile on pavement from the park to Fort Meade, and then you're on the Centennial. At one point before the turnaround, you actually hang a right turning off of the Centennial to connect to the Deerfield Trail to get to Silver City, and that's maybe a 4 mile stint, 3 or 4 mile stint on the Deerfield Trail to Silver City, 3 or 4 mile stint back, and then you're back on the Centennial again. Mostly single track. Again, there's that ATV section from Pilot Knob to Nemo, and that gets rugged. It's a lot of use. That's not single track, but the single track is very lovely when you're on it. ATV section, not so much, but it is what it is. Highly recommend the race. Like I said, Chris and Ryan have done a phenomenal job with that race and keeping it going. I know they work their butts off. I was talking to Barb, just Ryan's wife, and she said he was already a zombie on Thursday already before the race started, just because limited sleep, because you got so much to prepare for. As somebody who has put in 2 years now of helping race direct just a 50K, 20K and 30K race, I turned into a zombie at the end of that week, and that's just a 50K. They have a whole 100-mile race to contend with putting on, and so kudos to them. They've been able to get some phenomenal volunteers as well. I know Jeremy and Emily have been great with marking the course for them, and somebody else, I forget his name, he was the guy bringing in the tent top and at Alkali. I think he had gone out and taken care of some poison ivy spots that were right on the trail and took out the poison ivy, so a little less of it. There's still a lot on there. Not a problem if you're a superior human being like me and not allergic to it. But like I said, great race, great efforts overall. Kudos to anybody that brave enough to toe the starting line for any of those races, and that endured it all to get to the finish line. It's never easy out there. Just no matter the weather conditions, you could still have the perfect weather condition day, and it's still not going to be an easy race. but it is a fun time. More fun when you're not running it, and just hanging out, helping other people do spectacular things. So fun time, highly recommend. Come on out, check it out next year. Last weekend of June, plan on being there. One of my top 3, because I can't pick a favorite. I would say it's a favorite, but then the next race happens. But definitely top 3 favorite weekend. So happy to always be a part of it. So check it out for yourself. And we'll see you the next time around. Thanks for listening.
This has been a JWBN production. Thanks for listening.